all, and welcome to the weekly podcast. I'm your host, Gurtej Atwal. Today, we have a special guest with us, Monty Sethi. Welcome, Monty.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monty. So, we'll talk with Monty about his aviation journey. So, he is a Tracy resident. He learned to fly gliders and made his first solo flight at the age of 15, then gained his private airplane pilot rating less than a week after he turned 17, which is the minimum age to receive the certification. It allows him to carry passengers on his flight. So, for the first time out from the Tracy Municipal Airport, he invited his sister, Sahi Sethi, to be his passenger in his vintage 1963 172D. So she is also learning to fly the gliders. So thank you, Montique, for joining and providing us the information towards the aviation journey. So please tell us how you got introduced into aviation.
Yeah, so my dad's actually a pilot, and so I've been around airplanes since a very young age. So because my dad's a pilot and he loves aviation, we've been going to museums, air shows, and fly-ins for as long as I can remember. And I've always enjoyed looking at airplanes and just exploring them. So that's what really got me into aviation. And I remember when I was 6 years old, my dad really got back into flying. And every time he would go fly, I wanted to go fly. So I would go fly with him. He would let me sit in the up front in the right seat, and he would let me do basic maneuvers or manage the radios. And so that's really how I got introduced.
No, so when did you decide that you want to fly? So at which age it was enthusiastic to you?
Yeah, so when I first started flying with my dad, I was around 6 years old. And at that point, I wasn't really, I don't know, I was interested, but I didn't know it was a goal that was reachable or feasible so easily. So when I was around 10 or 12 years old, I learned that you can solo in a glider at 14 years old, and I was surprised how young that is. I'm like, okay, right now I'm 11 or 12. If I can solo in 2, 3 more years. And so at that point, I was really like, okay, this is something I can do. So I decided to pursue it.
Yeah, no, so you told that your dad is a pilot, so you had his support. So how about your mother? So how she reacted when you decided that you want to fly at such a young age?
Yeah, so because my dad is a pilot, uh, my mother's also been flying with my father ever since my dad's been flying. Uh, on the other hand, my mother is like super terrified of roller coasters, but she loves flying with my dad. So whenever my dad's gonna go fly, he'll take my mom for lunch once in a while, or we'll take family vacations, and my mother will go. So she loves flying now. And when I was learning to fly, she supported me too because she knew how safe aviation is. Because my father has been flying; he's a pilot. Uh, my mother was very supportive, and in fact, after getting my private pilot airplane certificate, I took my mother for lunch at a local airport, and she really liked that.
Yeah, no, that's great. Now you have a great experience, the first-hand experience flying. So there's always a thought comes to everybody's mind. So is flying safe? And what happens if one of the engine quits? So does the airplane fall from the sky?
A good question. So a lot of misconceptions out there that flying's dangerous, and when something happens, the plane's going to fall out of the sky or crash. But flying is actually safer than driving. So they're just saying that the drive to the airport is the most dangerous part of flying. So studies show, and it's actually proven, that generally flying is safer than driving. And when it comes to emergencies, and let's say your engine were to quit or something, pilots are always training for emergencies. Every so often, pilots have to go do some training, and during those trainings, they especially train for emergencies. So pilots always have a backup plan. And if an engine were to quit, the plane won't just fall out of the sky. Airplanes can glide to safely land. So you always have options.
Right. No, all the times we see the smaller planes that fly from Tracy or somebody goes from Stockton. So there's another thought comes to everybody's mind. So are the bigger planes safer than the smaller planes?
Generally, yeah, bigger planes are safer because the pilots that are flying those planes, they're professional pilots. They've gone through a lot of training, have a lot of hours behind them. And because they fly almost every day, they're very current, so they're up to date on the rules, and they really know what to do. And they also, so the airliners, they fly with like two pilots in the aircraft. So one pilot might be flying, one might be handling the radios or talking to air traffic control. So they can split up the resources, and that allows for safer flying. And in addition to the airlines, uh, the way the airlines operate is pilots don't have to do all the planning themselves. The airlines have routes that they've designed for different flights. And so a lot of times, the same set of pilots will be flying that same flight over and over again. So they know the route and they're very familiar with it.
Yeah, no, in news, we always hear or listen that takeoff and landing, those are different than when the plane is up and flying. So can you explain the mechanism for our listeners? So how does an airplane fly?
Yeah. So I'll break it down. So it's pretty simple. So every airplane has an engine. The engine creates thrust. Now there are different types of engines. You'll see the small airplanes that you might see flying around Tracy, a couple thousand feet over the ground. They'll have like a little propeller in the front, and that propeller creates thrust, which pushes the airplane through the air. And so when the airplane goes through the air is flowing over the wings. And as the air flows over the wings, the airfoil or the shape of the wing, it's creating a low pressure on top, high pressure on bottom, and that creates lift. So think of it if you were driving down a street in your car, you open the window. If you stick your arm out kind of like this, and you move it around, you'll see that as you increase the angle, your hand will want to go up. So that's the basics of how an airplane flies.
Yeah, no, but as it seems like it's a going from point A to point B. So like now we have GPS on the freeways. So are there any highways or freeways in the sky as well? And how do you find the way if you want to go from Tracy to San Francisco? Does the Google map work or do they have some kind of GPS as well?
Yeah, good question. So no, pilots don't use Google Maps, but some aircraft are equipped with GPS, and you can use that GPS to find where you want to go. But another way to navigate is pilots can have a map on their GPS, and they can look outside and say, okay, here's the Golden Gate Bridge, here's where I am, okay, here's where I am, and here's where I want to go. So there are different ways of navigating. You can use a GPS, or you can look outside and just know your way.
Yeah, no, sometimes while flying, when somebody is traveling, we always see some kind of turbulence or there's a bumpy ride. So, why is that?
Yeah, so this is related to like weather as well as physics. So when you're flying in a commercial airplane, the turbulence might be due to different air masses converging. Uh, so that's what causes turbulence. And at lower altitudes, uh, Another form of turbulence might be like wind flowing over, let's say, the hills, over the topography of the earth. That causes a little bit of turbulence too. So think of it like you have two rivers converging. When those rivers converge, the water will make some turbulence. Just like that, the air also creates turbulence when it converges.
Yeah, so you started learning at a young age. So, what's the lower age or the allowed age when one can start learning? And from your experience, is it hard to learn flying?
Good question. Yeah, because I started flying at a very young age, and I was flying with my father since I was like 6 years old. I had a lot of experience. I didn't start flying with an instructor until I was like 14. So, but the legal age, there's no age where you can start learning how to fly. You can start learning how to fly at any age, but you have to be 17 years old to solo a powered airplane. To answer your question, is it hard to fly? No, it's not hard to fly because I love flying. It doesn't seem like work to me. It just seems like fun. Um, yeah.
Yeah, no, you also had the glider's license before you started flying the airplanes. So, what's the difference between a glider and an airplane? And can one should try the glider's license before trying the real airplane?
Yeah, uh, good point you brought up. So, because I was so keen on learning to fly, I knew that you can fly a glider at a younger age than an airplane. So I went ahead and got my glider license first, just so I could start flying earlier. And after my glider license, I transitioned to airplanes, and now I fly both gliders and airplanes. I find gliders are more of like recreation, and then airplanes, they are recreation, but you can also use them to travel. And the difference between a glider and an airplane is there's not much, but there is a big difference. So glider is pretty much an airplane without an engine. So let's say you had like a normal airplane, and when the engine quits, you glide to the ground, just like a glider. So the
Right.
principles are the same when it comes to the physics and the aerodynamics behind it, but you just don't have an engine propelling you.
Got your point. So, you have a good community involvement as well. So, while you have some time, so while flying, so are there some opportunities, or how were you getting involved in the community service as well?
Yeah, well, because my dad is a pilot, he likes to give back to the community as well. So he volunteers with a few organizations that are listed on this PowerPoint. Angel Flight is an organization where pilots and they have their own private planes or they may rent one. Uh, so if you have access to an aircraft, uh, you can volunteer with Angel Flight. And let's say there's a patient that needs to go from like Oakland to Portland for some sort of medical procedure or something. So a pilot will volunteer with the organization, and they'll fly the patient to wherever they have to go, just so it saves them time and saves them stress.
Right.
Another,
Yeah. No, it's
another
a great service too. Yeah, you never know when somebody needs help, especially in remote areas where we do not have the bigger infrastructures close by. So
yeah,
learning these kinds of skills and while you are doing something else, so it can be helpful. So
yeah,
now,
and
yeah, we are curious. So how one can get started to get the license? So what are the steps for that?
yeah. So the first thing I would say is really find out if you want to fly. So go for a discovery flight. And if you're part of the youth, you can join your local EAA chapter. That's Experimental Aviation Association. And if you join their chapter, you can meet with local pilots and other aviation enthusiasts. And EAA gives out free airplane rides to the youth. And as a bonus, you get to talk to and meet new people. So when I was younger, I was an EAA member, and I did take some EAA flights. Those were a very good way to get introduced. And then after that, after you've taken your discovery flight, your EAA flight, go to your local flight school, and after that flight, see how much you like it. Do you still want to fly? If you still do, well, then you can start your training. Or another way is, well, if you know a pilot and you talk to him, they might offer you a ride. You never know.
So these FAA chapters, so these are globally, or these are just in the United States?
Uh, these EAA chapters, I believe they're only in the United States.
Okay, got it. So then how long does it take to get the private pilot certificate? Because one has to have certain amount of hours in flying before getting this certification.
Yeah, so the FAA requirement, Federal Aviation Administration, their requirement for a private pilot certificate is minimum of 40 hours of flight training, and the average is 60 hours of flight training. But let's say you really wanted to get your license and you were very committed. Let's say you flew twice a week and you were really dedicated. You can get your private pilot's license within 3 to 6 months.
Right. And now from the perspective of the cost, so it always from outside it seems like it can be unapproachable or it's not affordable. So how do you just describe, so how does it, what's the cost behind this learning journey?
Yeah, so there are a lot of scholarships out there, especially for the youth. I personally got scholarships from the NorCal Soaring Association for gliders. They gave me $3,000 toward my glider training. And some other scholarships out there are AOPA, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. They offer scholarships around the nation. And then another local scholarship might be Patriots. Patriots is a jet team based out of Byron, and they have some scholarships as well that can help pay for your flight training. But to answer your question, how much does it really cost to become a private pilot? It really depends where you are in the country, but the national average is about $9,000 to $12,000. But keep in mind, the more frequently you fly, the more current and proficient you will be. So it'll take you less time to become a pilot. That's a really good way to save money.
Right. And there's another question always comes to everybody's mind. So does one need a perfect eyesight to be a pilot? Or what if somebody wears the prescription glasses? Are they allowed to be a pilot?
Yeah, good question. This might be a common misconception, but even the Air Force, they don't require fighter pilots to have perfect vision, and you certainly don't need perfect vision to become a private pilot. As for Air Force pilots, if you're not colorblind and your vision is correctable to 20/20, you can become a pilot. And wearing prescription glasses doesn't mean you're disqualified.
And does one has to be good at mathematics and physics to become a pilot?
You don't have to be a scientist to become a pilot, but the more you know about math and physics, it makes the theory regarding flying and aerodynamics and weather a little bit easier for you.
And do we need some kinds of FAA permissions to fly a private plane?
No, you don't. The good thing about America is, well, this is where aviation was founded. So especially after World War II, general aviation flying became very popular. So America is one of the countries where we don't need any permission from the FAA before we have to go fly. So if I wanted to go fly right now, I could. I don't need permission from anybody.
So how far a small plane can fly? Because we more often see small planes in the smaller cities. So what's the distance wise it can go?
Yeah, I mean, really, you can fly it as far as you want until you run out of gas. Um, so if you want to fly across the country, sure, you'll have to make a few fuel stops, but it's possible. You can fly as far as you want. And recently, a female pilot, I believe she's around 18 years old, she flew around the whole world in a small airplane.
Yeah, no, weather-wise, if we see when we are flying, so there are clouds, so small planes, do they fly above the clouds or in the clouds? How does that work?
Yeah, so generally you want to stay away from the clouds so you can see what's around you. But yeah, small planes, they can fly in or through the clouds. It depends on the pilot and the airplane. But yeah, generally they can.
Yeah, because in Bay Area where we are, so it's in San Francisco, it becomes very cloudy or very foggy sometimes, or maybe in Tracy as well. So how does the airplanes land in those kinds of situations? Because this is pretty common where we live.
Yeah, good question. So if it's really foggy in Tracy or San Francisco, um, if it's super foggy and you as a pilot aren't able to do that, or the airplane is not legally able to do that, you can go find another airport, like maybe Stockton or Modesto, and go land there if it's not foggy. But if your airplane can do it and you can do it, some airplanes, I should say, they have an onboard GPS, and that GPS will help you find the airport and come in and land.
So, and sometimes we see that lightning has an impact on everything, like when the weather is not good. So, can lightning make a plane crash as well?
No, so you might see in the movies that lightning strikes an airplane and all the electronics turn off and then the plane uh, might crash. But no, that doesn't happen in real life. Um, Lightning actually hits big commercial airplanes quite frequently, and you just don't feel it sometimes. Uh, the turbulence associated with the weather conditions which lightning may occur, those might be uncomfortable to you as a passenger. They might cause turbulence, but lightning won't make a plane crash.
Right. So, what kinds of certifications can one get in flying?
Yeah, awesome question. So after you get your private pilot certificate, there's always room to improve, always room to become a safer pilot and more advanced pilot. So generally, after getting the private pilot rating, a lot of pilots go for their instrument rating. The instrument rating allows them to fly in clouds. Uh, and then after the instrument rating, some pilots might go for a commercial rating. And with the commercial rating, you can get a job as a pilot. So when you get a job as a pilot, you can go fly skydivers, you can go fly a private jet. A whole lot of options open up when you become a commercial pilot. And after a commercial pilot, then you can go for an ATP, airline transport pilot. That's when you really start flying for the airlines after you get your ATP.
Right. So, for you, is it just a hobby, or do you want to fly professionally for an airline or as a corporate pilot?
Yeah, so what started off as a hobby, the more I fly and the more I love it. So I want to go fly professionally after I get my commercial license.
Right. And how one can use their private pilot license? Can they fly anytime, anywhere in the United States, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if you have a private pilot's license, yeah, you can fly. You can fly anywhere in the United States, pretty much. You could even fly out of the United States. Personally, my dad and I and our family, we've flown to Mexico in a small plane, and it's completely safe and it's completely legal. So that's one of the privileges of a private pilot's license. But other than that, I mean, you can fly with your friends for fun. You can go explore new places. I mean, you might do a weekend trip, uh, maybe to like Utah, visit some national parks. or do a day trip to Half Moon Bay and go hiking, or might do some volunteer work, such as flying a patient to somewhere or flying puppies from a rescue shelter. So a lot of options, even with a private pilot's license.
Right. Then you have a good amount of experience now flying. So, from your perspective, how much further training and experience would you need before you become an airline pilot?
Yeah, so as I was talking about the different ratings earlier, uh, I would need an instrument rating, and then after that, a commercial rating. And after the commercial rating, if I don't have 1,500 hours by then, I'll need to build those hours. So those 1,500 hours, those are required to become an airline pilot. So after I get those 1,500 hours, that's really 1,500 hours of experience. Uh, then I can go for my ATP, Airline Transport Pilot Rating. And in order to get an ATP, you have to be 21 years old.
Right. So, what are the careers related to aviation? So, if someone studies or learns about aviation, so what are the different options and opportunities do they have?
Yeah, so aviation isn't just limited to being a pilot. A lot of other things you can do. For example, you can become a mechanic. You can work on airplanes. You can become an air traffic controller. You can be controlling airplanes. Uh, I mean, a lot of us know flight attendants. They're really in the aviation business. Flight attendants another good option. Or you can work at your local airport. Maybe work at the flight school, in the office, or a lot of options.
Right. So I think these are the options that one can use if they love flying. Somehow they're not physically qualified to be a pilot. So these are the options. They may be closer to the environment where flying happens and contribute towards and just have their passion.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So another thing is, so how can one sample a flight in a small airplane? So are there some options around?
Yeah. So if you're on the edge, should I learn to fly? Should I not? Uh, it's okay. You can go to your local flight school and you can take what's called a discovery flight. So you'll go fly with an instructor. Uh, they'll, they'll show you how to fly the plane and see if you like it or not. If you like it, then good. Then you can go take some flight lessons and hopefully get your license. But if you figure out it's not for you, it's okay. I mean, it's just that's why you took the discovery flight.
Right. No, thank you, Mantik. Appreciate your time. And I personally learned a lot, and I'm pretty much hopeful that the students, school going, college going, their parents, now they're aware that there's an option and opportunity because in developing countries, there are not that much opportunities available. If somebody sees the plane, they want to fly, there are not that much opportunities. But here we have opportunities around us which anybody can avail. And you are very much into this mechanical domain where you like flying in the flying industry. So what's your passion, and for graduation, what do you like to do?
Do you mean like graduation in college?
Yeah, college, which
Oh
stream?
yeah. Yeah. So when I go to college, I want to major in mechanical engineering, and that'll really open up a whole other world of opportunities. The degree in mechanical engineering, there are a lot of options. I mean, I can go work for NASA. I can go work for a defense contractor. Uh, but really, the end goal is I want to become a professional pilot. So I might go fly for the airlines, and if something happens, and if I'm not able to, I can always fall back on my degree in mechanical engineering, which is also what I love to do. I love being hands on and working on and fixing things.
Yeah, no, the other thing is, as we are very much closer or kind of part of Silicon Valley now, but majority, whomever we interact, they want to go into software industry. But you have a passion into mechanical. So is it right to say that your exposure to the airplanes or the mechanical infrastructure encouraged you towards this journey?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I've grown up around airplanes, like I said. I mean, growing up around airplanes isn't just flying them. I've also been working on airplanes with my dad. I mean, my dad does his own oil changes, changes the tires. I'm always there helping him, and that's what I love to do.
Right. So yeah, no, these small things when you are doing since long, so they kind of encourages you and builds an interest in you. So
Yeah,
thank you, Matik. And if somebody from the audience has any question, kids or parents, yeah, feel free to send those questions to us. We'll get them answered from Matik, and hopefully we'll do a follow-up session to clarify some of the questions. Sincerely appreciate your time, Antique, and best wishes for your future journey in education as well as aviation. And for our audience, thank you very much for joining. Please give us the feedback and the topics you want to listen. We'll see you next week. Till then, stay healthy and stay informed. Thank you, Mantik.
thank you.